But I'm going to call the meeting to order, since I'd like to stay on schedule. So first order of business is introductions. My name is Norton Cabell. I'm your chair, as long as it's your pleasure.
John Van Lanningham, member of the HPB.
Chris Pryor, Eugene City Council.
Darcy Phillips, Cornerstone Community Housing.
Emily Raymond, Neighborhood Neighborhood Housing.
Daniel Ivey, at-large HPD member.
Kristen Carley with St. Vincent de Paul.
Marina Bradford, nurse recorder.
Isaac Judd, Housing Policy Board member.
Jenna Ridley, Housing Policy Board member.
Stephanie Jennings, City of Eugene staff.
Chris Wigg, member of the Housing Policy Board.
Teresa, we have lost you.
And Teresa Kennedy, City of Eugene staff.
Christine,
Christine Lundberg, Mayor of Springfield.
welcome.
Nicole Stellar, City of Eugene staff.
Ellen Mae Galloway, City of Eugene staff.
Robert Souza, student review.
So I have a public comment.
You left Todd off.
Todd Will.
Oh, sorry. I have a public comment sign in and nobody signed in. Anybody from the public want to say anything? Christine, you want to say anything else? Okay. Next item on the agenda is the minutes, and I didn't get the packet before, so I have not read the minutes. Have you reviewed the minutes? Has anybody reviewed the minutes? So let's put this off until next month then. If that's all right with you all.
I don't think we got an email with the packet.
Didn't see one.
So I looked for it yesterday.
Not the only one, huh?
Did you get
I
it,
got it.
Darcy? I sent it last Friday so that people wouldn't think it was Monday, but I'll double check. Through constant contact, so check your junk boxes too.
I did.
It's okay.
I even read it twice.
Well, is it right?
I don't know, because I wasn't here.
That's
so
a lot
I-
of responsibility right there.
All
Well,
right.
if anyone didn't receive the packet, if you could just let Teresa know, because then she can just make sure that things are in constant contact
Right.
correctly. So,
And Pat isn't here, but he said he was coming, and he said he didn't get a copy of Pat Barr. Got a copy either.
Has he replaced Joe Burton?
No, I don't know where Joe is.
alternate.
Yeah. Okay, items from Housing Policy Board members and staff. I'll start off. You will recall that a couple of months ago, we thought we sort of decided to have a planning session. And I decided to postpone that because I thought it would be worthwhile for me as your chair to have a chat with each of the appropriate jurisdictions ahead of time, so we can put a little bit of thought into what we're going to do. And because of a bunch of logistical reasons, me traveling, everybody else, well, you've been traveling too, right? I haven't been able to do that, and I still intend to, so we're going to defer that for a while. That's all for me.
Are we meeting on Monday? Good. That would be here anyway, but.
Chris?
No.
I have nothing.
I knew
So you said you're Emily from what?
Metro and Willamette Neighborhood Housing Services.
Okay.
We have a new name, but I can't say it until September.
Okay.
If you come to our event on September 12th, you'll learn the new name.
I just heard something strange, and so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
just give the whole thing. So our new Director of Development starts Monday. And I have a final interview tomorrow with a development associate. So hopefully, knock on wood, by this time next month, we will have a fully staffed expanded development department.
Who's the development director?
Her name is Erin Grimshaw. She's coming from DC. She's been working the last 2 years in the Montgomery County Planning Department, which is the Maryland burbs of DC. But before that, for about 8 years, she was a consultant developer for nonprofit affordable housing agencies. I think she's going to be fabulous. And we have our manufactured housing person on board. She's been here about 3 weeks now. So Kristen, I know, and I are still in touch with Teresa about figuring out which HPB meeting it makes sense for us to come do a little bit of a manufactured housing work, state of the universe address. Probably after legislative session makes the most sense because then we'll know what's happened to that omnibus bill and can address that at the same time.
Great, thank you.
And Lori Huber and I are meeting with her next Friday.
Yes, that's right.
Good.
I don't have anything.
Nothing here, just waiting to hear about tax credit funding for the River Road project.
So, I'm sorry, Kristen.
Just waiting to hear about tax credit funding for the River Road project.
When do you hear?
We were supposed to hear last week and haven't heard, so I don't know.
All right. Daniel? Daniel?
Oh,
Yeah, I mean Isaac?
Oh, I'm sorry, gotcha. Yeah, nothing today.
Okay. Jenna?
I guess nothing really. You probably already talked about this maybe last month, but Springfield extended its SDC waiver for ADUs. Yes.
Great. Extended? You mean approved or whatever?
Well, it already had one.
Oh, they already had one? I didn't know that. Okay. Okay.
But it was supposed to expire at the end of June. Now
Great.
it does not.
Good. Thank you.
I think that we'll get to most of mine
Yeah.
when we talk about Renner protection planning.
Okay. Stephanie?
Several items. So on Friday, I was part of a panel. That was the Eugene City Club discussion about the land acquisition for affordable housing program. And Terry McDonald was part of that panel, and Cameron Ewing from River Road Community Organization was part of the panel as well. And there were probably about 50 or so people in the room. It was pretty well attended, really good discussion about the project, the land acquisition program for affordable housing, its history, and that we are looking for more sites to purchase through that program. I don't know if others who were there, if they wanted to share their thoughts about it.
I just had a lot of really good conversations with people there about just kind of their ideas about land acquisition, land trust use, and it seems to be that there's a lot of energy and excitement about the idea of different housing typologies and different ways of approaching affordable housing. So that's all I have.
Okay.
So other items that I wanted to mention, so as folks know, council passed the construction excise tax, and so it takes effect. Yes.
Hello, Lucy.
Oh, hey. So are you having a retreat today? No. It's a regular thing, so it was on my calendar too, as long as Brooke's calendar, so, okay.
I'm not sure what's happened with the logistics.
I don't need to interrupt.
I deferred it in order to have some offline conversations with some of the jurisdictions. I'll get to you.
Perfect, thank you. Have a great meeting.
Apologies.
No, it's like, give me, Mike got some steps in, I'm good.
Sorry.
So council approved the construction excise tax. It takes effect July 1st. But as everyone knows, there's a set of offsets, so there's no actual financial impact to developers. But there were some administrative rules that need to be put in place. Those administrative rules are now out for public comment. But it's basically just kind of giving some definitions to what council passed and making sure that people understand exactly how this will be applied. But again, there is an offset, so there will not be a financial impact to everyone.
What's the actual effective date? Is it?
July 1st.
It is July 1st. Okay.
July 1st. So that's sort of the first part. The second part is developing some summary documents to make sure people understand what it is, frequently asked questions. So we've been spending some time mostly internally with staff, because staff in building and permit services are doing a lot of the conversations with development folks within the community. So that's sort of two. And then the third part is starting to think about the advisory committee and thinking about the structure and what that would look like. If anyone has sort of interests or thoughts about that, please touch base with me as we're kind of trying to think through options at this point in time. And then, I imagine there will be a pretty sort of complete request for interest for that committee and a process for selecting. So that's CET, Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is really what we're going to be calling all the monies going into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And then
So that's the same money that the MUPTI fees go into. That's the same fund pot.
So there are going to be multiple parts to this, kind of pot. So one is the revenue generated from the residential CET. Two is the revenue generated from the commercial CET, because there are different requirements in the
right,
legislation
right.
and the ordinance around how you use those dollars. The third, which we're having a little bit of discussion about, is the MUFD and whether or not that becomes sort of part of this. The other part that is part of the ordinance is the $500,000 of general fund that
Right.
council
Right.
intends to allocate. Those dollars would not be sort of formally committed until council takes action on their supplemental budget
Right.
in December. So really, for all intents and purposes, no dollars will be available until midway through the next year, because one needs time to accumulate, and then we won't have the general fund dollars until
So-
December anyway.
So
So we're kind of planning on using that time for really
Sorry,
kind
yeah.
of developing the structure for how this is going to be used.
So the ordinance doesn't differentiate between residential and commercial, the use of the funds. The state bill of law does, of course.
It does, because as you recall, 15% of the residential has to be sent to the state for
Right.
down payment assistance
Right.
and comes back, and the ordinance has to sort of mirror essentially the state
Oh, okay.
language.
There are no additional constraints.
They're
Unless you
not.
put in IC.
Yeah.
Right, there are not additional constraints within the ordinance, no,
Right, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Although, I mean, in a word, yes, because the state, essentially for the commercial, it said that you could actually use part of the commercial for any purpose.
Oh, yeah.
So the ordinance does,
Doesn't say that.
I'm correcting myself, but the ordinance does limit it to housing,
Yeah, right.
development and programs.
Right.
So it is more restrictive than the state's.
True.
Yeah.
And so the administrative rules that are out for comment now, where would we find those?
So they're available on the city's website. We can send a link out to folks if they want to take a look at
Please,
it.
Please
please.
do.
It definitely sort of deals with the collection side. It's
Okay.
not, it does not address uses or the committee in any way.
Send us a link.
Yeah.
So if a member of the Housing Policy Board were to want to advocate that that committee consist or have represented on it consumers of affordable housing services, this would not be the administrative rule to comment on?
No, it would,
Okay.
talk to me.
Yeah.
Talk to me about it, and yes, because it's not, that's not going to go in an administrative rule.
So the city manager will, in essence, appoint an advisory, whatever it's called.
Most likely.
But based on input from you guys. So
Yeah.
talk to Stephanie.
No.
Anybody else here too? I already have.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the last thing I will mention is that it looks like we are scheduled to go back to council to talk about this again, but not until July 24th. And so, because council wanted to have a little bit more discussion about CET.
Implementation.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not IZ.
Correct.
No.
Correct.
That's not happening at all. It's been put off and put off and put off, and now it's not happening.
Well, so we had the initial work session where there were requests for additional information about
Right.
it. And, and so, I think we've intentionally prioritized getting CET up
Right.
and running.
Right.
Yeah. There was no sense of
And there will,
imperative about it.
right, they did
Okay.
not specify a time frame for coming back with
Okay.
that.
Okay.
But there is, and the council calendar is incredibly full right now. So it will
Always.
likely be in the fall that
Okay.
there would be some kind of discussion about that, but it has not been scheduled. Yeah.
So I think you've covered item number 5. We're still working on number 4, which is items for Housing Policy Board members and
Right.
staff.
Right. Sorry.
That's good.
Well,
That's efficient.
yes. So then the last 2 items I just wanted to mention is the action plan was, unanimously approved by council. This is the Eugene Springfield Action Plan. And this included a fair amount of money for support for housing rehabilitation programs. And so we're reaching out to folks about their housing rehabilitation needs. And so that would be a good opportunity to get together with your new development director and talk more. And we're already talking with others about that. And then lastly, I was just going to mention I went to a talk in Portland last night by the founder of the Corporation for Enterprise Development, who really, they've really kind of put forward a lot of the asset building concepts that have been pursued in a lot of different ways in our community. And he has a new book out, A Few $1,000s, which it really kind of summarizes all the different ways in which you can approach asset building and increasing household stability. And so
What is the book called?
it's called A Few $1,000s. And so there's a lot of information. The Corporation for Enterprise Development is now called Prosperity Now. And it's an organization that has been around quite a while, and they're sort of most well known for helping to implement the concept of individual development accounts, which are matched savings towards a specific asset program.
We're also heavily involved in manufactured home park.
Yes.
Resident purchases.
Yes.
And they went through a period in which they changed their name to CFED, which stood for nothing, which was very strange.
It stood for Center for Enterprise Development, didn't it?
Maybe it was, at one point, they just said it's CFED, but.
It's like KFC.
But now it's Prosperity Now.
KFC doesn't
So-
stand.
Who
We can
can
transition to
oppose
that.
prosperity now?
Yes, yes. Teresa, did you have other items?
Sure. So Monday, the Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee had a CDBG tour. We just brought a couple of brochures to show in case anyone's interested. And we visited Betlift from St. Vincent de Paul on 6th Avenue and went to New Roads and Station 7 from Looking Glass and the Eugene Community Service and Catholic Community Services on 7th. And so we saw just kind of over time how CDBG has impacted those facilities and programs. And then we ended it at Wheel a Pizza Pub. And as they have a business development loan. And Councilor Semple joined us, as well as, I think, 4 members of the advisory committee and staff. So it was a good turnout. Yeah. And then last night, the planning division had their Making It Happen fair over in the library from 4 to 7, just to feature their projects coming up in the fall and current projects. And I had a little booth just to talk about what the city does with fair housing and to inform of the fair housing plan update that will be happening in the fall. And I think with that, I don't know the final numbers. It was a well-attended event. I think there were 100 people within the first hour, so maybe 200, 250 people is my guess. But, yeah.
Who else do we have? Alan? Anybody? Okay.
I see a book.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, so where are we with the SDU, ADU, what do I call them now?
ADUs.
ADUs. Where are we in that process of reviewing those rules?
I don't have the latest information about that. We could get that teed up for.
Because of the LUBA?
Yeah.
We're waiting on the LUBA appeal, or
Yeah.
is it? Oh, no, when is that coming out?
The seat over here, Joe, if you want.
I don't know.
Okay.
So I would, I can get Alyssa from planning to come maybe at the beginning of the next meeting and
Okay.
give an update on that.
It's okay.
I think
And
it's
so-
linked somewhat to the code review and that particular stuff. So it's kind of waiting till we have a little more information on the code review, so we know what kinds of specifics we want to deal with. So that's why it's kind of in limbo. We don't know what the tools and strategies of the code review timeline is.
Okay. Hi, Joe. You're late.
I apologize. I
right.
came up and Christine Lundberg was leaving, and I had invited her to this meeting at the group's request, and so I decided my time was better spent with her for about 10 or 15 minutes so she would stay engaged.
Okay, good for you. Legislative update.
So I just wanted to reserve some time in case folks wanted to talk about critical items. The one that the city has been most focused on is extending the tax exemption that we use to exempt low-income affordable housing, and that still has not been completed in the process, and so there's a bill on the Senate side and a bill on the House side, and they both are still alive. The Housing Alliance is aware of it, but I just want others who rely on that program to be aware of it as well, and continue to remind our legislators of the importance of it. It seems like it's on everybody's radar, but a lot of things happen at the end of the session, and things can get lost in the shuffle.
Stephanie, could you either now, do you know, or could you email out the names or the numbers of both those bills and which committees they're in and how we should be proceeding with advocacy? Yes.
So I can tell you that right now.
Excellent.
Off the top of my head, because that's where I was this morning. There was a work session on House Bill 2130, which is, it includes a number of extensions of property tax exemptions, one of which is ours, the one that extended the sunset for 307-515 affordable housing. There's also one in that group about Habitat imposing, but Habitat has a particular exemption that exempts land held by Habitat for homeownership programs. And the staff of the fiscal folks at the legislature have proposed imposing a sunset on that exemption, and Habitat's not too thrilled about that. But I don't know whether that will go forward. Well, so 2130, as I said, includes a number of other things. They reviewed those other things this morning and did nothing, which is maddening because you go to Salem and then go home. The other bill is Senate Bill 737. So the 2130 was in House Revenue, which is chaired by Nancy Nathanson, and Nancy Nathanson has a good working knowledge of this exemption. And the other champion on that committee is Pam Marsh from Ashland. So we've got, and Pam Marsh has introduced an amendment to 2130 to change the sunset extension from 6 years to 10 years, just because we don't want to come back so soon. There's no policy reason there. But so those are the champions on the House Revenue Committee. 737 is in a different committee, and it's called the Joint Tax Expenditures Committee, colloquially known as JTAX. And JTAX consists of both the Senate and the House Revenue Committees. So it will include all the same people from the House Revenue Committee. It meets infrequently. It's meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30. And the agenda item simply is review everything in their workload, which I've been told includes 737. 737 differs from 2130 in that it has the 10-year extension, not 6, so we like that better. And it doesn't include all this other stuff that 2130 includes. We don't really care which one of them moves, we just want one of them to move. At this point in the legislative session, the session has to end by June 30th without a vote, something like a 3/4 vote or something to extend it. There are all sorts of rumors about when they might end before that. From the pessimistic Floyd Brzezinski saying June 28th, 2 days before the deadline, to the ambitious saying June 14th. Others say June 21, so God knows. It's all now about money and a few policy issues. And the money is not resolved, although departments have been sort of told what to expect, but it's not finalized. So that's 737. Well, and also I should say, at this point, if you have a bill, your main goal is to make sure it's on somebody, the speaker or the president's list. It's as unscientific and informal as that. So we've been told that those two bills are on the speaker's list and the president's list. of bills that will move before they go home. The latest rumor or suggestion was that Legislative Revenue Office staff will take all the tax credit and tax exemption bills that have to be extended in some form or amended in some form and put them into one omnibus tax expenditure bill. That's happened in the past. So we were told this week that that will include 737, some property tax issues, or some income tax issues regarding manufactured home park sales. There's a tax capital gains break if a park owner sells to the residents. The $5,000 tax credit for residents of a park that closes, and a couple of other things, and put them into a different bill, which I had never looked at before, 2126. So if you're tracking at home, and you can do that on OLIS easily enough, you can actually list the bills that you're interested in. They'll send you an update. For example, an hour ago, I got a notice from them saying that, here's an amendment that's been suggested for my landlord tenant bill. So you can track it that way. So there's where 307515 is. It's on the list, we've been told, and it's just a matter of monitoring it. And we'll know more after tomorrow's JTAX meeting.
Yesterday, I was in Salem testifying on Senate Bill 10. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's the one that it authorizes increased densities along transit corridors. And while in concept, that's a perfectly fine thing and something we're already working on, what happened is the Senate President basically went off into a room and came up with the densities, the proposals, the mechanisms, and then came out and sprang them on everyone. Ultimately, it only applies to Eugene, Springfield, and Salem, just those three cities. None of those three were involved in the process of writing this or advising on it, even though they asked. And one of the challenges is all of the work we've done around transportation planning, a lot of the Envision Eugene work, a lot of work this committee has done in terms of our task force work would basically be set aside, replaced with this stuff out of Salem. So naturally, the city of Eugene and Springfield and Salem were all three there speaking in opposition to this particular bill, saying, yeah, we're absolutely already working on increasing density along transportation corridors. The River Road Santa Clara study is a perfect example of our work along that. All that work would be for naught. 8 years worth of Envision Eugene would be out the window if this passes. So I don't know if anything will actually come from it because it's one of those bills that can easily be used as a negotiating tool for getting other legislation passed. So whether it goes or doesn't go won't be based on whether or not we want to increase density. It'll be whether or not it's a good bargaining chip for other things. After that testimony, we had a chance to sit down with Senator Manning, who is the chair of a committee where some of these things are falling into because they can continue on. And he was talking a little bit about the Senate's role with regard to 2001. And he was saying that his position on 2001, at least within his committee, is that he will be supportive of it if you can make it a voluntary opt rather than a mandatory. He said if it's mandatory, he's going to be opposed to it. We assume it's going to move out of committee and get to the floor. So what our strategy is to work the actual full members to say, yes, once again, we agree in the basic concept, what we're trying to do to create more affordable housing, but this mechanism doesn't really do that and it takes local control away. So we'll still continue to work on it, but I don't think this is a way to go. And he said he would work with his members to also either get a voluntary aspect to it or to oppose it.
So let me supplement that a little bit. Senate Bill, where am I? House Bill 2001 is an infill bill, forcing cities to allow greater density on single-family land. And it's came from the Speaker. She's also the one that did the bill 2 sessions ago that was trying to force cities to do better on ADUs. It's scheduled for a Ways and Means Subcommittee, which
Right.
Senator Manning is the co-chair of, along with Representative Gomberg from Newport. It's called Transportation and Economic Development, TED. And it's scheduled to hear 2001 on Tuesday afternoon at 1. If it moves out, and the Speaker has been negotiating with some of the cities, I think with the League of Oregon Cities, and she thinks she's gotten some less opposition. I have no idea, I'm not involved. and also with the development community to try to build some support for it. It will need Republicans to pass, and that's where the realtors come in. Thank you, Isaac. If it passes out of TED, it will go to full Ways and Means first, and then it would go to the floor of the House first and then the Senate. So that's the process that's left.
And NEDCO's come out in favor of that. It's one of our priority bills for the November session, because it includes cottage clusters. Well, I mean, we support duplexes and triplexes as well, but in particular, we really support cottage clusters in single-family zones. I can't tell you how many lots I've looked at in all of the suburban areas that we work, and it's, a half-acre lot, and we could build a 4,000 square foot house on it, but we can't build 4 600 square foot cottages. And it just breaks my heart as we're trying to create first-time home ownership opportunities. So we're definitely included in the advocacy to push for 2001.
And the city is opposed because the local control issue?
Primarily, it's the local control issue. I mean, in terms of the concepts, I'm very supportive of what it is they're trying to do, but I don't think they're doing it the right way. Like Emily says, I think we should continue to work on cottage clusters and things like that, but I'd like to be able to do it with the collaborative, cooperative participation of our stakeholders.
So I heard, and this has been a couple of months ago, that the realtors and related groups were in favor with amendments, but I wasn't clear on which amendments were being proposed that they were talking about. Do you have any clarity on which amendments were out there for discussion at this point?
I don't.
I think there's 11 of them.
The 11, the dash, so amendments are referred to as something dash number. And so the dash 11 amendments were incorporated into what is now the B version of the bill, which I have here and you can look at if you want. But, no, actually the A version of the bill. So there may well be, I think there are other amendments being discussed, but they haven't shown up in OLIS yet, and I'm not part of the negotiating team, so I don't have them.
Yeah, so how,
your lobbyists ought to have
they
them.
probably do. How can I best advocate for that with them?
Send him an email, Sean Gillians.
Okay.
He pays attention to emails from realtors. That's good. That's good. You want to be known. Good or bad. So other bills that I could report on, 2916 is done. It's all the way through. That's the bill that amends an existing statute with regard to what I refer to as urban campgrounds. So Dan Bryant's Opportunity Village, for example. That existing statute's an old statute from 1999. It was weird. It seemed to be limited to yurts. And limited cities to 2 of those per city. So the revised statute removes that 2, makes it clear that it's not just yurts, it can be tents and huts and so forth. It passed, it's all done. In both houses, lots of legislators stood up and said, I hate this bill, I hate this bill, I hate this bill, but I'm voting yes. Because they have a hard time approving what they view as less than adequate housing, but it's better than sidewalks. So 2916 is done. 2896 is going to be a compilation of 4 bills, all from Representative Marsh, 2894, 95, 96, 97, or maybe I've got that wrong. But anyway, 2896 is the one that's going forward, and they mainly have to do with funding for rehabbing manufactured homes. Or helping to demolish them and dispose of them with asbestos, or helping something like CASA work with the residents to purchase a park and creating a task force within HCS, Housing Community Services, to work on manufactured home park issues. So that apparently now has the support of the speakers. It's in Ways and Means, it's also in TED. It's scheduled for Monday afternoon at 1. And it's going to take some money, and I think the speaker's talking about 10 million. We'll see where that ends up.
John, does that want to include a financial product to purchase a replacement manufactured home?
Possibly.
It includes something like a down payment
I
assistance tool.
thought I saw something about that. Okay.
And then 2 other bills to mention. One is Senate Bill 8, which Emily testified on. It also was a President Courtney bill. and it's trying to address bogus appeals of land use, local land use decisions for affordable housing projects that are without merit. You know, so basically what it says that if you appeal and you don't prevail on something, and a prevailing could mean a remand, and many of them are remanded on minor things. But if you fail on everything, then you're gonna have to pay attorney fees to the
We're supportive of that.
other part. So that's also done. And then lastly, I want to mention that I noticed in the minutes, I referred to 2997, which came from Representative Noble, a Republican from McMinnville, and it was amending the IZ statute to allow McMinnville to do IZ without the 20 unit per building limitation, which is a killer for cities outside of Portland. And it was going to allow them to do a cumulative 20 units on several parcels.
Oh, right.
It passed the House pretty heavily, and it got squashed in the Senate and is gutted and is does nothing any good anymore, so forget that. But that's an example when you're reporting to council about amending the IZ statute, tough road to hoe.
Yeah.
I would add just a couple more notes, which is the bill that is to make some tweaks and expansions to the Oregon IDA initiative is, last I heard, a little bit in jeopardy. It's also in this Joint Tax Expenditures Committee. And the bill contains two major components. The initiative right now is funded with $7.5 million in tax credit authority, and it's a 0.7 it's a 70 cent on the dollar tax credit. When the federal tax code changed, that impacted the desirability of those credits at the state level. And so one of the requests of the bill is to make it a dollar for dollar tax credit, which would basically preserve the current level of the Oregon IDA initiative. The second component of the bill actually asks for an increase of tax credit expenditures up to $15 million from $7.5 million. So that would actually allow us to expand the IDA initiative. We need at least the first half of the bill to pass just to hold the initiative harmless. If that doesn't pass, then it shrinks considerably and could be in jeopardy entirely. And we would, of course, like to expand it because our waiting list, for example, in Lane County is 2 years long. And there are a whole lot more people who could benefit from the program if we get it extended. Apparently, there is a problematic senator who just doesn't want to schedule it for a hearing period. And so it's at risk of not moving. Nancy Nathanson is the main champion of it right now, trying to keep it alive and trying to keep the expansion alive. So I've been reaching out to the Lane County delegation to encourage them to support her in any way they can, and anybody who feels strongly about that program or has clients who use that program, please join in those efforts, because it's still going to be a tough lift.
I would just add, as part of his comments last night, Bob Friedman said Oregon's IDA program is the best state program in the country.
Yep.
So there are other states who are trying to model what they're doing after what Oregon has done.
Yep.
So there are a bunch of money bills still out there for housing, and I don't know, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen with those. But an example is 2006, which is in TED Monday afternoon. So
Which one is that?
2006 is the one with 20 million for lots of stuff related to housing. Not for building it, but a number of different tools, including lawyers.
I hear relatively good things about LIFT and the increased funding for LIFT. That's the one that supports both rental and ownership development. We got 80 million in the last biennium. The asks range from sort of 130 to 200 million, so I don't know where it's going to land, but everybody seems feeling pretty positive we'll get at least 130.
So the Housing and Community Services budget, I think, is in TED on Tuesday, I think.
We're still fighting for foreclosure funding as well. That bill is alive, and I actually just heard a rumor that there might be foreclosure dollars suddenly in the HCS budget when it comes out. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that would be great, because we've never actually made it into the HCS budget with those funds. We've always been fighting until the last day of session about them. So that would be wonderful. Apparently there are a couple of legislators who are worried about economic downturn within this biennium, and so they've decided maybe it's time to actually advocate for that program. Yeah.
So is that foreclosure prevention funds for like Nedco's programs and stuff?
Yeah, for a counseling program
equipment?
statewide. And it's the counseling specifically, well, this is actually interesting. So theoretically, it's the counseling for people entering the foreclosure mediation program. So the mediation program still exists. By statute, it requires that homeowners attend a counseling session before they go to mediation, but there's no funding for the counseling, so that's why we have to go back and advocate for it every biennium. Part of the rumor that it might end up in the HCS budget was actually that they might open it up to anybody who needs foreclosure counseling, and not just people who are specifically entering the mediation program. So we might be able to actually work with clients who we can't work with right now when they come to us for support, because right now, unless they're headed to that mediation program, we can't actually provide them services. So that would be very exciting.
Joe?
Well, I don't want to interrupt, because this is, the discussion you're having now really is operationally, how do you get as much money as possible for this stuff? I'm wondering if as a housing policy board, we ever take a step away and say there's something fundamentally wrong. This is my opinion. There's something fundamentally wrong with tax credits as the mechanism so that rich people can get richer as the mechanism to provide or support or subsidize low-income housing, which then creates less money that goes to the state or the feds, which then creates the same problem we're dealing with and exacerbates it. Is that something that's not, forgive my naivete and forgive me for interrupting a sort of a pragmatic strategy session, but is that,
We've talked about it before.
do
I
we
mean,
ever
you know,
like
people
make a
complain
statement
about
and send things to our legislators or?
No, because we've drunk the Kool-Aid, Joe.
Okay,
I mean, but we could stop drinking it and rethink it. The main one is the federal tax credit.
right.
That's the one that mainly benefits wealthy people. And we can, my view is that's a black hole. I don't advocate at the Washington.
Okay, and I apologize if
But
that's inappropriate.
but we acknowledge, I
Well, it's
mean,
not inappropriate.
people complain about the cost of affordable housing, the cost per square foot, for example, of some of these developments, and 50 cents on the dollar is due to the expense of managing the tax credits.
Right. It's just
Maybe I
following
exaggerate, but not by much.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt
No.
the discussion.
The only tax credit that we use that I can think of is the capital gains exemption for park owners who sell their parks to either a nonprofit such as St. Vincent de Paul
Oh, well, forgive me.
or to the residents. And that does benefit the owner of the park who's making millions when selling it. But the other things, we call them credits, but they're basically tax exemptions that the state doesn't
Forgive me.
charge
Thank
a
you.
person. So that's the only one I can think of where you're benefiting rich people indirectly.
Anybody else?
And we would love to have an alternative. I mean, if you're looking to try to finance a project, you use that tool because you have that tool in your
It's all you
toolbox.
got.
If
Yeah.
we can find other tools that we can use instead, I would love to know what those are and how we can figure out how to do them.
I forgot to mention something in information sharing, which relates to some stuff we were just now talking about, which I should probably share, and that has to do with the Patrician Mobile Home Park in Gateway. So that's a park that's owned by a man named Dick Boyles. He and his dad have been involved in development of Gateway for decades. Dick Boyles himself specializes in building hotels. He owns the Patrician. The Patrician has been there since at least 1990. It's sort of been in the past. It's right next to all that development in Gateway. It's an obvious target for redevelopment. It's zoned low-density residential, but it's in a plan designation which would allow a rezoning. And Dick Boyles has applied to the city of Springfield to change the zoning from low-density residential to mixed use. Mixed use conveniently would allow development of a hotel or a convention center, which Springfield is apparently eager to have a convention center. So the tenants, so he doesn't have to do that right now, and he's saying publicly that he's not planning to do that for a number of years. But the tenants who are, it's a senior park, so they're old and they're nervous, and they're freaked out, and they've been advocating. They had a hearing before the Springfield Planning Commission. Planning Commission hasn't made a decision, and it's scheduled to go before the Springfield City Council, based on whatever the Planning Commission does, in September. But that's getting a fair amount of attention, and I had a phone call from Leonard Storr, if I pronounced his last name correctly, who's a new Springfield City Councilor, asking questions about what sort of state subsidy would be available, and the answer is very little. Well, there's something. It's the landlord will be required to pay $6,000 for a single wide, $8,000 for a double, $10,000 for a triple if and when he closes the park, to help them with the loss. They're probably going to lose their homes, because most of those homes are older, probably can't withstand a move. Partly what he was asking me was, is there a state fund that would allow those homes to be fixed up so that they could withstand a move? Maybe in Marcia's bills, if they pass. How much? Probably not a ton for that. Would it do this park? I don't know. My suggestion to Leonard was, you should have the city staff survey for vacancies in parks in the metro area, because when the last time we did this, there weren't very many. And then the second question would be, what are their criteria for admitting a home? Because many of them will not allow a home to be moved into the park that's older than, say, 10 years. And the homes in the Patrician are in fine shape, but they're older than 10 years. So there's a lot there that, and I don't know what he's going to do. I offered to meet with him, but he didn't take that out.
Not directly related, but potentially, I think Marcia's omnibus bill does include the Springfield pilot new park development, correct?
No, that's 1024, and I don't think 1024 has been blended into Marcia. I'll check and see. You think so?
Allison said it was
okay.
earlier this week.
All right, so that's 3 million.
Yeah.
Basically earmarked for a mobile home park in Springfield. So,
Yeah.
But you still have the same moving units challenge.
yeah, I didn't bring that bill with me, but.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
moving along. Chris?
Okay, so the Renner Protection Task Team met on Monday during our normal time. Housing Policy Board members present included Chair Norton Cabell, John Van Landingham, Isaac Judd, and myself. And then other task team members were present, including Kara Smith from Food for Lane County, who I think is still back there. Hi, Kara. And Josh Caraco from the Springfield Eugene Tenant Association, Ethan Clevenger from the Active Bethel Citizens, Teresa and Stephanie. Am I leaving anybody out? Oh, and some folks who work at Jennings
Oh, yeah.
Property Management.
Yeah.
We're all there. And so, was that everybody? Oh, and Lori Hauber from Oregon Law Center. And so we were able to talk about next steps for the Renter Protection Task Team. And you have on your handout some of what we were able to come up with.
Does anybody need a copy of it?
It was in the packet.
It's in the packet. Do you need a copy of the packet?
Where is it? I can get it.
Are there any extra packets?
And so so we had a good discussion that was facilitated by Stephanie, and I assisted a little bit, but Stephanie did the heavy lifting, about kind of putting together the feedback that we received from the Eugene Renter Survey, along with some of the qualitative data we collected doing the roundtables, plus feedback from council during the work session on, what was the day of the work session? Do you remember?
I'm sorry.
The work session that council, you went to talk to
The
them?
Renter Protections work session?
Yeah.
Yes. The date of it?
Do you remember?
It was in March.
It was in March.
Yes.
And so in March, the council had a work session and gave some feedback to Stephanie that she shared with us. And so our proposed work plan is as follows. Objective, protect renters and vulnerable populations, prevent displacement. That is a carryover from the last work plan. Proposed work plan, identify priority tools and strategies to protect renters and prevent displacement in areas with changing housing market conditions in Eugene. And those priorities are 1 through 5. 1, consider strategies for increasing tenant and landlord awareness of rights, responsibilities, and resources. From the survey and from the listening sessions, it was very clear that renters don't know what their responsibilities are, what their rights are, and how to assert those rights if it comes to that. And so one, like the absolute lowest hanging piece of fruit is to educate people about how to mediate disputes with their landlords, essentially, and what is on their side of the street and what's on the landlord's side of the street. And so that is, I think, by far the lowest hanging piece of fruit that will not necessarily require new ordinances or like a changing of laws, so that's cool. 2, consider challenges or strategies related to application fees and processes, including pet rent, security deposits, refunds, screening, housing navigators, et cetera. And a lot of those specific items there were items from council, and so we want to make sure that we're being responsive and bringing back the information that council is asking for. Number 3 is consider creation of supports, including deposits, first and last month rent, and exploring potential programs. 4, exploring options addressing housing quality and condition concerns raised through the Renner survey. That this is a pretty clean interface between the rental housing code. And so I think at our next meeting, we're going to hopefully have the opportunity to check in with Rochelle Nichols, who supervises that program, and that she is a true boss. And then number 5 is identify priorities for rental housing data and consider strategies for compiling and analyzing data. So that's what I got for you. Are there any questions?
I would supplement your report. Thank
Yes.
you very much by noting that the idea of information for both sides might include requiring landlords to distribute an information sheet. So there could well be some concern about that.
The piece that is not on here is the membership of the committee. And we did have a little bit of discussion about that.
We did.
And so really kind of thinking about how to create a balanced representation in the committee that considers these ideas. But hopefully having a group of no more than 10 people, just because logistically it becomes very difficult to schedule and get the group together to make progress on these discussions.
Okay.
Question, so CEDA's renter protections hotline or that they're working on, is there, did that come up in the discussion at all? Is there any timeline for when that is going to be coming out? I know there's another training coming up for it, and where does that fit within the framework? Is that just like kind of part of number 1, or?
So the hotline was not discussed at this meeting. According to the minutes of the last CEDA meeting that were forwarded to me at 2:02 p.m. today, I've learned that the training is happening on June 11th, and is that right?
Yeah.
June 11th, and that the plan is going live after that, according to the minutes that are on my phone. Yes, sir.
So what this looks like to me is the objectives of an advocacy group that cannot really do much as it relates to creating new housing or anything that relates to housing stock, but it's more like just has a compassionate desire to protect vulnerable populations to the degree an advocacy group can. Is that incorrect?
I think that that's probably pretty close to accurate. The goal here is not to build new housing, it's more to keep the people who are in that housing and on the margins in it instead of out of it. Right?
Right, or in somewhere, and making sure the process
Yeah.
is fair and that they're protected.
It's an
I just wanted to
access.
add, I'm just trying to get my head
Yep.
around it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I would just augment that, so we did the survey. There was a discussion at council about the various issues related to that. And there were a lot of questions about what local jurisdictions could do as it relates to some of these issues.
Oh, they're all important, yeah.
So I
It's related
think,
to the TAC report. Fundamental to the TAC report is keeping people in their housing.
I'm sorry, am I interrupting you? I was just going to respond to Chris, but yeah, go ahead.
I didn't-
yes, so no worries, no worries.
We have a second level of interruption here now.
So I think really from what we were trying to do from a staff perspective is say, and council asked us to work with Housing Policy Board to consider these strategies. And so what would that look like? And so this, it is really sort of an attempt to take what is a very large and complex issue and kind of reduce it to a few priority items that make sense to this group, and then I can talk internally and make sure this sort of makes sense within the city so that we can develop something to bring back to council within 12 months is the kind of time frame that I'm thinking of. Yeah.
So would this body be a good group to somehow connect with TAC implementation as the Eugene City Council and the Lane County Board of Commissioners, and hopefully soon the Springfield City Council are working on that? I mean, is there a relationship here or no?
I think there would be a relationship with this group, homeless poverty board, there's a number of groups
There's a
that will
number,
definitely have to be
okay.
folded into this process and coordinated. This certainly would
This
be
being one, okay, thank you. That was just a question.
So, next month, let's have an update on where we are with the TAC report. Is that fair?
So do we need to decide who is going to be on the task team today?
No.
Is that, do we need to do that?
No.
Great, then we'll decide later.
But maybe we will by next month.
Well,
So this membership that's on the back page is no longer valid?
is valid until it is replaced.
It's valid until it's not.
Valid till it's not, okay.
Yep.
Well, and I think what we've
Covers the
sort of been
options.
trying to do is to say, okay, this is the work plan for this year, so that people who are participating in these committees have some understanding of the commitment, timeframe, and then if we're shifting to a new scope, what should the membership of that committee look like to respond to the issues? And so yes, it could definitely include some of the people who were on in the past, but I think rethinking that in light of what we're trying to do. I think for today, definitely hearing comments about the priorities. Are these the right priorities? Is there something really significant that's missing? Would be helpful. Because this was really our effort to try to kind of take a very large topic and sort it into something that could be actionable and that a group could work through.
Real quick, on the TAC report, I don't know if it's inappropriate to mention this or not, or suggest it, but so on the Unity Eugene Springfield podcast that we just did this week, we had Peter Chauvin and Reagan Watchus talking about the TAC report and about its implementation. It might be, I don't know if that's something that we can share with the group, to share with their people, and just in the interest of getting the word out about what the TAC report is and having a common person understand what's the idea of the podcast. So.
And just a quick question, and maybe this is something we'll discuss more if we do have more of a strategic planning meeting, or maybe I just missed it in the last couple months, but the way that this is formatted currently, are we basically proceeding for 2019, 2020 with this one objective, or is this still one objective amongst some other objectives, and then really we're focusing on a task team for this one objective currently?
I don't think the group has decided anything
No.
about that.
I guess just a cautionary, that like the way that on this sheet, as an isolated sheet, it looks like the objective of the Housing Policy Board as an entity is only this one objective.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say, I think there was some expectation and some previous conversation about the Renner protections continuing. And we have a request from City Council, Union City Council to do this work.
It's still objective 3, it's the way it originally was
Right.
framed.
That's kind of what I guess when I was thinking of Joe, looking at this and seeing this, for example, as this,
Right.
the entire objective of this entire body now focused on renter population.
If only.
And I think our sort of focus was trying to prepare this actually in preparation for the work plan meeting. So to try to to help the committee kind of come up with a proposal, essentially, for the group to consider, so that we had something a little bit more formulated for next steps.
I still see the 3 objectives.
Yeah.
But this is a very important one that is actually beginning to get some traction that it never had before.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, and it's the one where just historically over the last 20 years, both state and, county and city, the least amount of work has gone into renter protection versus the various planning and just because of the way we do land use in Oregon, that planning stuff has had a lot of work to it where we're still playing catch up with the renter protection.
Okay, are we done?
You're the chair.
We are adjourned.
You need more landlord protection.
You get to tell us that.
Oh, the power, the power.
All right.
Sorry, I forgot to mention that you.